In episode 1, Sebulba is casually hanging out with a couple of friends when a space frog lands on his table. That accident is caused by Jar Jar, who isn't used to the concept of shops and panics when the merchant asks him to pay. And Sebulba immediately threatens to beat Jar Jar up for it. Later, Jar Jar is scolded by Qui-Gon for his lack of manners.
Don't do that again.
And Obi-Wan refers to him as a pathetic life form.
Why do I sense we've picked up another pathetic life form?
Which, if you think about it, is an incredibly violent thing to say. Usually, when a character is so universally despised within the story,
The ability to speak does not make you intelligent.
You saved my again!
What's this?
A local.
it triggers empathy in the audience. For example, if everyone insists that a character is so ugly that he belongs in a circus, we instinctively feel pity, we root for that character. And yet, for many people watching Star Wars, that extension of empathy was denied to Jar Jar. It often feels as though the audience wanted Sebulba to beat him up, cheered when Qui-Gon scolded him, and agreed with Obi-Wan about the pathetic life form. Before we get into his speech patterns and his clumsiness, let's zoom out and look at the bigger picture of his story, which might be one of the saddest in the entire Star Wars canon. The Jedi first meet him in the forest, where he seems to have been wandering alone for some time, having been banished by his own people because of his clumsiness. The movie never really pauses to acknowledge how dark that is, but think about it for a second. He's been exiled from his friends and family, universally despised by his own people, and now trying to survive alone in the forest that is now being razed. And when he meets the Jedi, even though they are not exactly kind to him,
Now get out of here.
No, Mrs. Stay!
he still chooses to help them.
The most safest place would be Gungan City.
And the Jedi only begin to respect Jar Jar when they realize they can use him, so the respect seems purely transactional, and almost immediately they resort to threatening him.
That is the sound of 1,000 terrible things heading this way.
They will crush us, grind us into tiny pieces, and blast us into oblivion.
They bully him into leading them to the Gungan city, even though Jar Jar has made it clear that returning there would be very dangerous for him.
The bosses would do terrible things to me if me going back there.
But the Jedi don't seem to care at all about Jar Jar's safety. And indeed, the Gungans do want to punish him.
He seemed to be punished.
But in a rare moment of kindness toward Jar Jar, Qui-Gon intervenes and saves him.
You saved his life. Your gods demand that his life belongs to me now.
Some fans argue that this is a contrivance, that this idea of a life debt is invented simply to keep Jar Jar attached to the main cast. But I don't see it that way at all. Qui-Gon is clearly saying whatever he needs to say to save Jar Jar from a dark fate. And it isn't even unconditional kindness, it's merely repayment for the help Jar Jar gave them by bringing them to the Gungans. And it is worth noting that Jar Jar is almost an afterthought to the Jedi, who were about to abandon him until he essentially begged for their help.
Any help here would be hot.
And keep in mind, Jar Jar only returned to Gungan City because the Jedi pressured him to do it. And now they were prepared to leave him behind to face the punishment alone.
Master, we're short on time.
Then Jar Jar travels with the Jedi. He tags along through the planet's core and then onto Tatooine, displaying plenty of clumsiness along the way, but I'll come back to that. For now, let's stay focused on his actual story, which resumes when all seems lost for the heroes, and Jar Jar mentions to Padme that the Gungans have an army that could help.
Gungan's not dying without a fight. We are warriors. We got a grand army.
And at that moment, he says perhaps the smartest thing he ever says in the movies.
That's why you know liking us, Mr. Things.
And you know, he's probably right. The humans likely want to feel dominant on Naboo. But the existence of a Gungan army complicates that narrative, and there is little doubt that the humans would feel insecure about another species having an army on their planet. So Jar Jar demonstrates real political awareness here. And what is heartbreaking is that he's also acknowledging something personal. He feels that the humans around him don't like him.
That's why you know liking us, Mr. Things.
And honestly, who can blame him?
Pathetic life form.
Back on Naboo, the Gungan city has been deserted.
There's nobody there.
But Jar Jar leads Padme and the Jedi to their sanctuary.
When in trouble, Gungans go to sacred place.
He is effectively the bridge that allows humans and Gungans to form an alliance. And for that, Jar Jar is promoted to General.
We shall make you Bombard General.
From the Gungan leader's perspective, that is a perfectly reasonable decision. Jar Jar is the only link between the two peoples. However, from the audience's perspective, that promotion may feel undeserved because we have focused on Jar Jar's clumsiness so much that we may feel he will not make a very good general. But do you know who else thinks he doesn't deserve it? Well, Jar Jar himself, who faints.
General?
And yet, how does Jar Jar actually behave as a general? Well, we don't see much, but from what we do see, he seems to perform objectively well, he keeps his composure.
Steady, steady.
And during the battle, while he and the troops are clearly overwhelmed, he still remains brave and fights any way he can. And that battle might be the highest point of Jar Jar's life, and possibly the happiest. Then episode 2 arrives, and he seems calmer, wiser, even nostalgic.
Mr. Bustin' with happiness seeing you again, Annie.
And worried about Padme.
She's forgotten me completely.
She's a happier than Misa seeing her in a long old time.
Padme has to leave, and she infamously entrusts him with her Senate seat.
I know I can count on you.
This will turn out to be a terrible decision, and there are two possibilities to explain it. Either it's a massive blunder on Padme's part, who should know that Jar Jar is not equipped for this kind of responsibility. The other option is that, after years by his side, she has come to respect Jar Jar's intelligence and trust his integrity. But actually I think it's option 1, because Padme doesn't even take the time to give Jar Jar proper instructions. She cannot even be bothered to stay long enough to hear him say thank you.
With more humility and
Jar Jar, I don't wish to hold you up. I'm sure you have a great deal to do.
Of course.
Honestly, this seems utterly careless on her part. Either way, Jar Jar is thrust into a critical position he never asked for, and Palpatine immediately exploits it.
But what senator would have the courage to propose such a radical amendment?
If only Senator Amidala were here.
And how cruel it is for Jar Jar that he ends up being the one who proposes granting Palpatine emergency powers. If you look objectively at the chain of events, almost every major character bears more responsibility than Jar Jar. The Jedi casually accept an army created under highly suspicious circumstances. And if Yoda and Windu were so worried, why didn't they speak to Jar Jar? Padme trusted Palpatine too, and the Senate was weak and corrupt. And yet, in the end, the blame for the death of the Republic basically lands on the intern who joined 2 weeks ago, and who speaks with a weird accent. And look at Jar Jar's smile in that moment. It doesn't look like pride, but more like relief. He isn't used to being cheered by a crowd, and it feels like he's finally being accepted, finally being valued, as if he found a home. And the next time we see him is at Padme's funeral, who basically died as a consequence of Jar Jar giving Palpatine emergency powers. Jar Jar must feel terribly guilty. His flamboyance is gone, and in the extended material, his fate becomes even darker. Because of his role in granting Palpatine power, he is banished by his people, again. And many Gungan and Naboo adults refuse to speak to him and say his name. He ends up making a living as a street clown, loved by children, but avoided by their parents. As one summary puts it, ultimately, Binks' brave acts in the Clone Wars were overshadowed by his role in the fall of democracy. And that is the last time we hear from him in the story. So I can only assume that he dies in anonymity as a tragic clown. So how can a character with such a dark arc still be widely hated by the fans? I've noted 3 main reasons why Jar Jar seems to be so universally hated. First, he gets too much screen time, allegedly taking focus away from more interesting characters. Also, his clumsiness and accents are perceived as annoying or even offensive.
You know, I find that Jar Jar creature to be a little odd.
And finally, there is a tonal mismatch for fans of the original trilogy who expected something darker. Some even spoke of betrayal, and Jar Jar, clearly intended for children, reduced the mythical vibe of the story. Now, I don't necessarily disagree with all of this, but I will argue that the hatred toward Jar Jar has been widely blown out of proportion. Yes, he's clumsy, there is no denying that, but the story already punishes him for it.
Miss Clumsy.
He's literally been banished because of his clumsiness, twice. And let's look more closely at what he's actually guilty of. This whole mess on Tatooine starts because Jar Jar boops a droid. Plenty of people would have been curious enough to touch it. Here it just backfires horribly, but the real problem is the droid, not Jar Jar. And in that scene, he's guilty of trying to help with something that is beyond his skill set. His lack of table manners is probably more a cultural thing than a Jar Jar thing. The humans around him just get annoyed at Jar Jar for not behaving like a human. As for the way he speaks, I am not one to blame someone for having a strong accent, for obvious reasons.
For sure.
Watching the English version though, I will admit that there are moments where I really struggle to understand him.
The bees hereabouts? Crazy!
And of course, having a character who is hard to understand is a problem. Regarding the accusations of racial stereotyping, I will not pretend to be an authority on American sensitivities around accent portrayals. But what we do know is that the black actor who played Jar Jar was subjected to such a torrent of hatred that he fell into depression and was nearly driven to do something terrible. And there is something deeply paradoxical here about accusing a fictional character of embodying a racial stereotype, while directing real-life abuse at a black actor. And about that high screen time, like it or not, Jar Jar is 100% relevant to the story of Episode 1. George Lucas famously said that
Jar Jar is a key to all this.
And honestly, it's not hard to see why. Without Jar Jar, there is no alliance between the Gungans and the humans, so there is no third act, there is no final battle. And finally, let's address the tonal mismatch. Look, I was a kid when The Phantom Menace came out, so I was exactly the target audience, and Lucas has said it himself.
You know, it's a film for 12-year-olds.
It is a cliché, but it's true that when we grow up with a franchise, we want the franchise to grow up with us. We want the sequels to be darker, smarter, we want Andor. And yes, Andor is phenomenal, but at the same time we should not gatekeep a franchise from younger generations. A few decades ago, the adult fans of Star Wars were annoyed at the 70s kids for liking the Ewoks. Then, those kids grew up and were annoyed at the 90s kids for liking Jar Jar. And now the 90s kids like me roll their eyes at the sequels. So, do the 2010 kids love the sequels? I don't know. Maybe we'll find out in 20 years when they start making video essays defending them. In any case, Jar Jar became the symbol of the Phantom Menace being for kids. And the kids in question were too young to defend him. But if we want younger generations to share in our love for the franchise, we cannot resent the parts that are tailored for them. George Lucas has named Jar Jar as one of his favorite Star Wars characters, and I don't think he was trolling. Jar Jar truly deserves far more compassion than he received, both within the story, where everyone except maybe Padme treated him as disposable, and within the fandom, where he seems so universally hated. It is genuinely sad.